Okay, so the previous videos had me just kind of abstractly give you the principles of the A, R, and the G evaluation and just describe how they get accomplished in rationale. So this video is me actually trying to do those things for you using the listicle that I mapped out way earlier on here, the one that talks about Canada being great. So that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully this won't take me too long, but it might be a little bit of a lengthy video. You can stop anytime you like. You can watch this as you do your own and kind of follow along my steps and take guidance that way, whatever it is that's most helpful for you. And if this isn't helpful to you because the kinds of things that I talk about or worry about when I'm working on my map don't seem to apply to yours, so this doesn't, then just show up to office hours and we can walk through yours and I can help you reason through yours live. Okay? All right. So the first thing I want to say is that you should anticipate, like probably the previous mapping exercise where you just did your listicle, probably most of you didn't get that all 6 points that were available there all on your first submission. There was probably one or two things that you had to tidy up that you missed, right? The same thing's going to happen here. It's going to be really rare that someone is going to be able to do their ARG and hit everything and do it all well the very first attempt out of the gate. This is your first attempt at this. This can take a while. The whole course is designed around making that possible, right? So if, and probably when, you get feedback on your first submission and you haven't done perfectly, because in this tutorial, in the tutorial module, I really want you to do kind of everything perfectly because I've given you easy examples, and so I want to make sure that I want to be really confident that when you pass this module and I give you and I set you up and release you out into the wild to look at real world sloppier, more complex arguments, that you're well equipped. That's why I'm kind of demanding that you do everything kind of perfectly on the listicle. That if and when you don't do it perfectly, that you look in all three spots for feedback and that you go to those to find accurately the kinds of things that you need to fix. You should not at all have to guess what needs fixing. Okay? You should know exactly. Now, maybe you don't understand why that stuff needs fixing or how to fix it. That might be true, and then that would require an email or a visit to office hours or something, or a rewatch of a video to try and see if you can figure out what you did wrong and how to fix it. But you shouldn't be guessing, oh, maybe he is unhappy with this part, and I should be telling you, I should be giving you at least enough information in the three spots where feedback is. And if you don't remember what those are, I'm pretty sure I said it in the Canvas tour video. That you should look in all three spots because there could be information in any one or all three of those spots to help you address any deficiencies that I saw in your previous thing, and then fix them and resubmit stuff. The other key thing I wanted to remind you about, which I also talked about in the Canvas tour video, is that if you respond to my grading by posting a comment that's attached to your assignment, I will not get a notification for that comment, and I will only see it if I stumble across it by accident. Okay? I only get notifications when you resubmit something. Okay? Just like you get notifications when I grade something and Canvas kind of pushes it back to you and say, okay, your turn with this assignment now. I don't get anything pushed to me and and it doesn't get put in my to-do list if all you do is drop a comment. Okay? If you resubmit something and at the same time write down a comment saying, well, here are the things that I did, or please make sure that you give me clear feedback on the R because I'm really shaky about that, and so if I didn't do it right, I want really detailed guidance about what to fix or something like that, which I'm happy to do, then that's fine. But comments alone aren't going to get my attention. Okay? All right. So to remind, right, we're going to do A, the R, and the G, and my slides here, I've got checklists here, which I might be flipping back and forth as I do my stuff, but let's start. Okay, so I have my map here. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is how it usually kind of loads up for me, probably you too. Every time, got to minimize that text panel and then zoom in so that we can actually see what's going on and not squint. So hopefully all of this stuff is legible for you. The other thing that often happens, even when you save stuff and you had it on before the last time you opened it, is sometimes the map references just disappear, so you have to turn them on again. So remember to do that, okay? Because it's not that important for the listicle, because everybody can see that that's the first, second, third, fifth, fourth, fifth reason. It's not hard to keep track of those things on a listicle, but when you get to more complicated argument maps, having these labels and having them auto update when you move boxes around and stuff is just essential. So you need to remember to do that. Okay. All right. So this is set up. This is how the argument should look. This is worth 6 points. On the previous assignment, I rephrased some of these to express what was in here. So like that's the title or the section header there. I rephrased that a little bit. In fact, probably to make it obviously a little bit better, probably add in the explicit comparison to American stuff there. So these are all ready. So the first thing I'm going to do, and obviously it always shows up with that reasoning building panel as the default one. If we were going to build more stuff in terms of reasons or objections, we'd go with the advanced reasoning panel, but we're not going to do that. We are not in the business for this listicle with improving it at all. We're here just to see it in its ugly and superficial glory. That's it. So we're doing A first, which means we need to go to the next building panel down, which is basis boxes, okay? And we need to kind of figure out, well, where are these coming from? Where's the general category of claims? So this is this claim right here, Canada's money is better than American money. Okay, so I'm going to go back up. Always have to kind of maybe reread to make sure that you have the right context, that you can figure this stuff out. And this person's using our a lot, right? And as I'm reading that, it just seems to me the source for this, they're not referring to some expert in currency. They are not appealing to common belief, I don't think, because I don't think that they are taking for granted that every reader of this already knows kind of the distinctive weirdnesses of Canadian money, right? Like that Canadians don't have a dollar bill, but they have coins. Maybe you know that, maybe you don't, right? And maybe you also, it doesn't talk about the fact that all our money is actually colored differently, so that when you're drunk in a club, somebody can't rip you off and say that 10 looks like a 1 in dim light. It's much easier when you have Canadian money and 10s are purple, right? And 1s are coins. It's a lot harder to kind of make a mistake between those two things. That should be in here, I think. But I'm not going to improve this argument. I'm just taking it as granted. I think they need to have, that's another reason why our money's better. But anyways, they're just telling us stuff, and then they're talking about strip clubs and whatever. We don't need to worry about that, right? But just kind of the fact, all of this stuff, the general reason that the money is better, seems to me that they are just asserting this with the intention that we accept it, that we accept this claim, this 1A claim right here, just because they said it, and we should trust them, the author of this. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up. That's the author. Generally speaking, we don't have to do very much research on these things, but when we're talking about assertions, you kind of want to maybe learn a little bit about who made the assertion. If it's a friend, a trusted friend you have lots of, that you don't have any reason to think would lie to you, right? And is generally not an idiot, right? Then that would be kind of enough background research to accept any assertion that your friend makes, unless you have particular reason to doubt their kind of competence at making that kind of claim. I'm going to just click through and ask this. Okay, so this person has just this article. So it's not like they have a long and distinguished career. of saying particularly intelligent or sophisticated things about Canada. So I'm learning about this person a little bit and learning more about the kind of evaluation that I might want to put in here. So they're asserting this, right? So author, don't really need to name them in particular here. You could if you wanted to. It's not super necessary, okay? But I think what I'm going to say here is that the author has only this one listicle they've written for Thrillist. I don't have a reason to think they're lying, but also no reason to think they are informed. Okay, and then I go back and I fix all of my tiny spelling mistakes. You'll notice that the text and stuff in these boxes is even smaller than the stuff there, so you might not be able to see that on the resolution. So let me pump that up here so we can see that clearly. Okay, so I think my opinion, which I've tried to articulate here, is that this person a little bit shaky as an authority on claims about Canada's money. I don't even know, right, that they're Canadian, right? Because that's not no identifying even claims on that stuff here. Probably they are. I don't have any reason to think that they're, you know, some closet American who's pretending to be Canadian or anything like that, but I don't have any reason to know those things. That might be part. I think I've got enough articulated reasons to kind of be skeptical about this person, mildly skeptical. So I don't have any reason to think they're lying, but I also don't know that they're particularly well informed about this stuff. And here's another key thing about doing this evaluation. Of course, I'm Canadian. I know a ton about our money, and I also, I mean, I'm a little bit of an expert on it. I would, if this was me, I would definitely agree with this. If they were writing this article to be read by Canadians, then I would find this acceptable. But I would find this acceptable not because this author said it, but I would find this acceptable because I would have hung a totally different box under here, the box of personal experience, where I would say something like that, or personal experience, or also another popular one which would also fit would be common belief. So I'm going to I would, if this was an article directed at Canadians, don't ask me why Canadians would need to know that. We already know that Canada's way better than US. But if it was being directed at Canadians, so I knew that the typical audience of this argument was Canadian, I would just be like, every Canadian knows this because every Canadian has seen both kinds of currency, right? Because every Canadian obviously has seen Canadian currency, and also every Canadian has seen American currency, if only in TV shows, right? Do you see American, all the boring green paper that you guys toss around? We've all seen it, we all know it, right? Or I could have personal experience here where I basically say the same thing every Canadian has experience, right? So every reader of this is going to have personal experience of both kinds of currency. But both of those kinds of basis boxes are going to only be appropriate if I can say that the audience for this is Canadians. But I don't think I can say that. I think that the audience for this is Americans or other kind of international non-Canadians. Sure, some Canadians are going to read it for entertainment and to laugh at Americans, but Americans are going to be the audience for this. So I couldn't use either one of those because they wouldn't be appropriate. Americans, if they don't have personal experience because they live close to the border or have been on trips to Canada, right, aren't going to know this stuff. It's definitely not a common belief. Most Americans don't know what Canadian money looks like. So they are going to have to rely on the actual author, and sketchy. So that's why I put the question mark. Okay, so the general message I'm trying to get here is, even if you personally know that this is true or acceptable yourself, like I know that 1A is true, right? don't be so kind of myopic and self-serving to evaluate this just for you. You want to evaluate this for the audience it's intended for. And so that's why that's that. Okay, so I'm going to look at this one right here. Having the two biggest feast holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, more spaced out is just proper feast management. If you're not solid on that, it could stand to, because maybe you don't know, and maybe you didn't even know that Canadians had Thanksgiving, and you didn't know that we had it on a different day. Of course we do. We have it on a better day. We're further up in the north, which means that harvest happens earlier because cold comes earlier. So our Thanksgiving is in October, which gives you way more space out between those two feasts, right? So I get 2 turkeys a year, and I'm not unhappy about them coming one right after the other. So another reason why Canada is awesome, right? But as long as you kind of know what this means, right, then now I got to decide, okay, well, what? I don't think, so I'm just looking at the popular ones here, right, and not by definition, right, because proper feast management, there's nothing in here, this claim right here is not true because of like the meanings of the words, bachelors or unmarried or something like that. That's not what this kind of claim is. I don't think I can say common belief because I don't think the average reader of this article is going to know that these two holidays are spaced out the way that they are. Even though it's talking about events, that's not the source for these claims. So I'm not going to put that. Again, this might be tempting both for 1A and for 1B if I was thinking that this author was intending, was kind of putting themselves forward as an expert. So if their about page had made claims of expertise, I am a lifelong Canadian and have lived here all my life, then expert opinion might be an appropriate basis box to pick. Personal experience? Nope, because the vast majority of the readers for this I don't think would have personal experience with Canadian Thanksgiving. And so I think really the natural and the only category is going to be this one right here. Again. And I don't think that I'm really going to say anything much different. The reason why I picked that, the reason why I think really I've got the same kind of, I think my evaluation, my A evaluation for 1B is pretty much going to proceed almost exactly the same as my for 1A, so much so that I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to control copy that and control paste that, and then snug it up and do that. Boom, done. Okay? When you're talking about listicles, or when you're talking about having a map where several of the basic claims, the starting claims of the map, come from the same place, right, and are really the same, then it's perfectly appropriate just copy over the, except you don't feel obligated to have a different one for each one, especially on listicles, which themselves are mass-produced and cookie-cutter. Don't feel any obligation to have all of your evaluations be, you know, specific and different and unique, right? Okay, third one, Canadians invented the Caesar. You might not even know what a Caesar is. They're disgusting. Okay, a Caesar is a Bloody Mary, but with clam juice in it. I don't get it myself. I'm not proud of this aspect of Canadian culture. I don't even like Bloody Marys particularly. Why would you have vegetables when you're trying to get drunk? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And so why would you have sea life juice added to that? It's not appealing to me at all. I'm not a huge fan of clams anyways, but clams with tomato and liquor, that's not my jam. So, but anyways, I did not know, and I'm Canadian. Maybe it's because I don't give a crap about Caesars, but I didn't know we invented them. I'm not proud that we invented them. And so I have, even as someone who's an expert in being Canadian, I can't evaluate this kind of thing. So I am going to go with that again, because I think that that's just an appropriate thing right here. They're not in this particular, The only way I'd kind of deviate from that is if they maybe had a citation or a reference to something else. If they had, say, appealed to Wikipedia, go check out the Wikipedia page, right? And it tells you that so-and-so it was the inventor of a Caesar. That would change. Then I might, okay, they had an appreciably different source, and I might go with that, right? Website, Wikipedia, and then I would evaluate my impressions of the reliability and trustworthiness of Wikipedia or whatever website they got it from, right? Next we got the legal age to drink is a reasonable 18 or 19 as their fourth reason. Now, this one might be a little bit more of a judgment call. I think it would be appropriate to copy this one over. But if there's one thing that might be common belief amongst the typical internet surfers, it is that pretty much every country in the world is much more liberal and relaxed about drinking ages than America, which is filled with Puritans who actually had prohibition in the country, which was crazy, right? And so it might be appropriate to use common belief and say like something like, even Americans are aware of lower age. But I'm not sure about that. My experience with Americans is with Americans who are relatively close to the border, such that when they hit 18 or 19, it's reasonable to, road trip up to Canada to get some drinks, legal drinks, right? But not all Americans are close to the America-Canada border, so that's probably not as appropriate. And if I was thinking that they were appealing to this common belief, like, man, everybody knows this, then I would probably have to give it an X. And I think instead I really would, again, do that. Okay? All right. Similarly, they're talking about the superiority of Canadian chocolate. And that really is just because American chocolate is butt. It's really bad, and almost every other country in the world, even your entry-level chocolate in any other country in the world, is better quality control and stuff like that. So, in terms of the variety and neatness of the chocolate bars, better, but also just the quality of the chocolate that makes up the chocolate bar. So you can get the same chocolate bar in Canada as you can get in the US, but the Canadian one will be better just because they make it out of a better quality chocolate. I know that. You probably don't know that. So if you're going to accept what this year, again, right? So this is an instance. Maybe this wasn't the best article to use as a walkthrough for you, because as it turns out, right, as we reflect here, look, that the A, I just kind of did the same thing, but this could be your listicle, right? But in my musings about alternatives here, hopefully I gave you some guidance that will help you build the A basis boxes for your listicle, even if not all 5 you can't copy across like that. Okay, so that's A. It's only taken me like 15-20 minutes to do that. Okay, and that's with me talking to you, so maybe you'll be more efficient than that. The next thing to do, and let's just make sure I've got a basis box hanging under every ending point, right? I have identified the source and evaluated the source's reliability and or trustworthiness explicitly in the text, and then I have summarized it by doing those guys. Okay. One small thing, hopefully you noticed that I had to pick the box and then pick one of these things to change the icon, right? And you'll notice that for some reason I'm not using the blue ones for my blue boxes. That's because those don't work, because those are for different. It's weird. It's a poor design choice. Obviously these are blue boxes. They should have blue guys up here so that you have that visual continuity. For some reason didn't happen, so that's how you do it. So if you're thinking, well, I'm clicking these but it's not changing the thing, it's because you're clicking the wrong ones. I don't know why they don't have just one set of 3 that works for all the different kinds of boxes, no matter which one you're kind of already like highlighted and focused in on. Anyways, moving on, let's go with R now. So R, again, we got a couple things to do. Let me flick quickly back to the PowerPoint. So again, here's my checklist. I did those things, right? I picked the category basis box, I identified the source in words, I articulated my evaluation of it, and I summed it up with the icon for the check mark or the X or the question mark. Okay. Now we're moving on to relevance. We have to shade every box and then write to our notes. And so we're going to do that. Flick now back to my, no, not that one. All right, that one, there we go. Okay, so we come back to my map here. Okay, so now I'm not doing anything over here yet. I'm going to look at each one of these, I'm going to highlight them, and I'm picking now this my overall judgment. Okay, so I'm thinking, how much does it matter to my personal feelings about my effect on this? How much does this matter? And again, I'm going to use that hypothetical, right? I'm imagining a world where this is true, right? That Canada's money is better than American money. And then I'm imagining a world where Canada's money is somehow more depressing and pathetic than American currency. If that were true, if the opposite of this box was true, that Canadian money was more pathetic and unoriginal than American money, I know, impossible to imagine, but you got to imagine it anyways. How much of a hit does my belief in this take if I pretend that the opposite of this is true? And for me, you know, it's not like Canada's money is the chief source of my pride in being Canadian, or my chief source of jealousy if I was non-Canadian with being Canadian. So like, that's not gonna, whether this is true or not gonna have a strong effect in this, so I'm gonna pick that. I don't think it has no effect, because it is one of those, it does contribute to this slightly, right? So that's why I'm giving it a pale green. Okay, this one right here, having the two biggest feast holidays more spaced out is better. And again, judgment call here, right? The important point is that whatever I pick, I need to be prepared to defend that judgment, to articulate it. So for this one, I'm going to pick strong. That's to me a really relevant reason, because if you have not had the joy of really kind of fully enjoying Christmas turkey and enjoying it because you've had enough break that this doesn't feel like a chore, then you're missing out. Again, for me, right, inventing the Caesar, like, I could care less, right? If that was false and somebody else invented the Caesar, would not make one bit of difference to me. Now, would it make a difference to the average American? Does this increase your esteem? So one of the reasons why I put this as strongly relevant, because I thought, look, when Americans learn this, they're going to be a lot more positively disposed to regarding Canada as being better. And so that's why I put it. Of these reasons here, relatively, this is one of the strongest, the most relevant reasons. That's why I shaded it dark. I don't think anybody's going to give a shit about that. Even if you're really into your Bloody Marys, right, or your Caesars, who invented it? This is not a point of national pride. This is not something that, as an American, I don't think that you would take as a point of national pride, right, that you invented. Guess what? Americans invented the Boilermaker. Woohoo! Right? Nobody cares, right? Or at least very few readers of this thing are going to care. So I'm going to color that gray. I'll point out, incidentally, that no variety in my A evaluation, but already kind of some variety in my R evaluation. You'll find that with your listicle, that maybe one or two of the ARG components are pretty repetitive and kind of uninteresting, but at least one of them is going to have some kind of interesting things to say. With artificially stupid and superficial arguments like listicles, that's the way it's going to go. When you look at more real world arguments, the diversity and variety is going to generally be far greater than and more interesting than listicles. So it's very rare that you're going to find a real world argument out there where every starting point comes from the same place, like this listicles did. Okay, carrying on here. So the legal age to drink is a reasonable 18 or 19. Well, okay. Now, if I was a cranky old person, probably that, right? But usually even though in principle any old person on the internet can go scrolling through and stumble across this thing, we all know who the target audience for this is, which is young people, so that, right? And then Canadian chocolate bars are much better than American ones. Again, most human beings really do appreciate good chocolate, but we're talking about Americans here, and you guys are happy with Hershey's, which is trash chocolate. That might count as a hot take in your world, but it's because you haven't had good chocolate, right? You're basically eating brown plastic when you eat Hershey's chocolate. Like, it has to be melted and hot, like it has to be on a s'mores to be tolerable. You people, my sympathy, my heart goes out to you with the chocolate that you think is good. Halloween is a horror show around here, like literally, when it comes to that stuff. So for you guys, for me, that, but for you guys, probably that. Like, for the typical audience of this, which I am assuming is going to be dominated by Americans, probably that. Okay, so I've kind of, the contrast here is with I articulated, I picked my basis box category, and I gave my kind of detailed opinion, and then later I summed it up with the overall sentiment, with my overall evaluation. Here we kind of went backwards, right? I shaded, I gave my overall, and now I have to do my articulations of 2, not all 5, right? And I did it kind of backwards like that because I knew that I wasn't going to have to do all 5. So in my talking through, deciding each one of these, I gave the articulation that I would write in these boxes. So hopefully you get to this stage, and now it's going to be easy to write these boxes. So I plunk a box, I drag it, I drop it out there. What I'm going to do is I have to first hover over that box so that it makes the auto-drawn arrow there. Then I'm going to drag it away, right? And then the arrow follows. And so now it's clear which box, which link, which connection it is that this is articulating my judgment of R on. And I can't just write any old thing here. It has to be my specific anal format to make sure that you're doing the right kind of thinking about why this box matters to that one, because I want to really force you to rehearse the hypothetical, you know, switch flicking to see if the light is attached to that switch, right? So you always have to start these out with if. Then the first half of the if is going to be describing the opposite of what the box is, right? So if I'm doing 1B here, right? 1B is claiming that Canadian holidays are more spaced out, right? So the opposite of that is, what if it was true that Canadian Thanksgiving was closer to Canadian Christmas than even the American holidays were, right? What if they were spaced closer together in Canada, right? So if Thanksgiving was 2 days away from Christmas in Canada, right? So that's me kind of expressing a really radically different and opposite world to what is happening here. So if this wasn't true, if in fact like the opposite of this was true, now then what do I think? What effect would discovering this have on my confidence with this? And for me, I think that both Canadians and Americans would appreciate spacing out their turkey feasts, right? Then it would be absurd to have 2 turkey feasts, and Canada would be worse than US, right? So because I shaded that with the dark green, that really has to correspond with a really kind of negative hit that I've articulated here in this note. Let me zoom in just to make sure that you can see what I wrote there. So I'm articulating in my judgment, right, that that 1B is relevant to Canada being way better than the US, because if I pretend the opposite of 1B, if I pretend 1B is false and in fact the opposite is true, then my opinion of Canada being superior to the US takes a huge hit. and I might actually reverse the rankings of Canada and America because of that change, right? Okay, now let me pick out my second R note, and just for variety, I'm going to hang it off the gray guy here, and let's see what an R note looks like for something that I think is an irrelevant reason. Now again, just want to remind, right, I have a question mark here, so I'm a little bit shaky on whether or not this actually is acceptable for readers of this argument. That doesn't factor into the R notes here. We are playing around with, we're asking, what if this was true? What if this was false? Those are hypotheticals. Doesn't have much to do with the actual acceptability of the claim. So I'm doing my R note here, and I'm just going to kind of pull it so it doesn't, I don't like the line there, right? So I'll do that. I'll do that. Okay, click into it. Okay, so it's saying Canadians invented the Caesar, but what if Belgians invented the Caesar? I didn't want to put just Americans in there, but I could put in Americans. Okay, and I'm awesome at spelling. Okay, so if Americans invented the Caesar, then my opinion of Canada's superiority would be absolutely unaffected, with extra G's and not enough A's. Okay, so that's me articulating the judgment. That's me explaining why I made that gray. Okay, and so again, just as with the A evaluations, the important thing is the words that you have here reflect accurately the overall judgment. Right here, I might have a problem with your shade, but I'll be much more reassured if your articulation in the R note kind of matches and justifies why you gave it the shading that you did. Okay, so I'm done with my R's here. So that's how my listicle looks. What do I do next? File, output, export to PNG, plunk that in a document. Okay, and so just to kind of save time on this particular recording, I'm not going to walk through how to extract this, how to export this and plunk it in my document. You can go back and look at the video that I did for that was previous. I am just going to flick to a blank Word document and just say, well, just imagine that I had plunked in my picture here, right? And also imagine that I put the URL for that guy right there, right? Because I need both of those things, and then the third thing that I need are my G answers, right? And so I am going to go back to my slideshow right there, and I did all those steps on the R checklist, so I'm good to go. So now I'm off to my G, and again, I'm just writing 2 answers, not all 4. I'm just addressing 2 of these. So I'm looking at these, and I am thinking, are there any unacknowledged objections the arguer left out? So yeah, let me do that one. And here, let's see, what's kind of an objection that this big fan of Canada did not mention as a kind of a counterpoint to their cheerleading about Canada? And I could say something, I might say something, I'm not going to write out a whole thing here, just kind of suggest and spitball some answers here, but basically it's just, write out a couple sentences, not a whole paragraph, not a whole page, just a couple sentences. So I might say something like, our military sucks. That might be one objection that somebody would immediately pop into somebody's mind, right? The Canadian military just doesn't compare. There's a variety of objections there. They're all kind of weak and lame, and if you were honest with yourselves, you would all prefer to be Canadian. I understand that, and I understand that you can't admit it, but we're going through the motions here, and we are going to say in my Word document, right, I'm going to write out something. I got to write out something, right? So and I would kind of make a couple sentences kind of backing up why somebody would think, right, that was an important or a plausible objection that someone could make. Now, the second half of the question, or the second question in there, is is that a significant objection? And so maybe I would say, after kind of saying something like that, I might say, this really isn't significant except for a small portion of Americans. I might say something like that, right? To kind of evaluate, how hard, how much does that objection hurt the overall case here, or is that kind of just a really secondary minor reason, a small setback that the 5 positive reasons that I have here easily counterbalance and outweigh, right? Okay, so that's one answered. What else should I pick here? I'm going to pick fragility because it's tricky. So it's a kind of maybe a trickier one to think about, right? So the idea here is I need to pick one thing the arguer could be wrong about. Basically what I mean there is you need to go back and look at the map. Okay. Just have to find here. There we go. Go back, look at the map, zoom in, actually pick one of the, sorry, I didn't mean to drag it, one of the boxes in your map and think, and just speculate, look, if this actually was false, right, would that ruin the whole argument, right? If I learned yesterday, I thought this was true, right? But if then I learned yesterday from a reliable source that I accept, actually, that's wrong, right? Maybe I learned the drinking age in Canada is 25, right? Uh-oh, right? Now, how badly does that damage my argument? That's what I would articulate, right? I would say, look, the weak point of my argument, right? I might say the weak point is drinking age because that's so important for college age students who are the typical audience for these things. If they somehow learned or were convinced by someone who said, actually, no, the drinking age in Canada is 25, that might be enough to scuttle this whole argument, right? To wreck things, and the other 4 reasons might not be sufficient to carry the day. I would articulate that in a couple sentences here, and then that would be it. And then you hand that in, and you're done. Answer 2 out of the 4, and you're done. All right? So what's next? Well, actually doing this on your own listicle, right? So remember to consult both this while you're doing it. Remember to consult the how to submit video because it might have been a while since you submitted the first step of analyzing your listicle where you built the map, the original map. So you might have forgotten some of the steps because it's a series of steps and they're all kind of boring. So you probably forgot them. So go back and relook at that if you need help reminding how to submit the video, what the steps are and what the order they are. The other important thing is I did all 3 things here in one kind of go, and so when I submit this, I'm going to get graded on all 3 things. If you aren't sure, it's perfectly appropriate for you to just do one of the 3 things first and get reassured a little bit that you're on the right track. Or if you don't want to invest kind of all your time, instead of doing all 5 of these and doing both of these, maybe you just want to do one A evaluation and you want to write 1 R note and you want to answer 1 G question and then submit that just to get some positive feedback from me. Or if you're worried about getting negative feedback and me saying it's all wrong, right, then it might be better just to hand in 1 of these and 1 of these and 1 answer to a G question, because then if I say they're all wrong, you haven't spent all this time fully completing stuff and have to like tear it all up and start all over again. So it's totally your call, right? I should be pretty responsive to grading, except if we're right at the end of the course and I'm swamped by everybody's stuff, right? So you could choose to submit just kind of partial stuff just to get quick and easy feedback that you're on the right track, and then hopefully I give you some part marks, I give you some positive feedback saying, yep, you're on track for this and this and this, just watch out for this, right? And then that gives you confidence to finish off the rest and then resubmit that, and then hopefully you get everything right, you get max points on the second submission. all right? But what you decide to do, totally up to you, okay? Just submit early, submit often, because that's how I give you feedback. So if you have gone off track, I need to see it, and you need to submit it through Canvas so that we both see it. It's in the right location, so we don't lose it. Don't email me stuff saying, I was thinking of handing this in, but could you check it over by email first? I will say no. Hand it in on Canvas, okay? That's the only place I want to see your work.